Fireside Tales. Hello. I'm Merlin, Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell weird tales within tales. And I drink coffee. Drink coffee out of my skull mug because I'm a deadhead. And because every week here at Fireside Tales, I have been telling the story of the Grateful Dead. But not just because I'm a deadhead. I tell the story of the Grateful Dead because it's a story about reincarnation. And every week here at Fireside Tales, we discuss reincarnation. So, I'm a firm believer in reincarnation. One of the reasons I am a firm believer in reincarnation is because of the Akashic records, or the Akasha. I've had access to the Akashic records since I was a teenager. And the Akashic records, or the Akasha, is an ancient library that doesn't exist in this physical plane. It's a metaphysical library that exists only in the meditative plane or spiritual plane. And it can only be accessed by people who have access. I have a key. I was given a key to the Akashic records by my spirit guides when I was a teenager. So we've done a guided meditation here on Fireside Tales for meeting your spirit guides. We discuss meditation every week. And we discuss my book in the Akashic records every week. Now, the Akashic records holds a book for every soul, supposedly. And in your book, your soul's book, is a record of where, when, and who your soul has been. So, I go to the Akashic records and I only look in my book, which is plenty because my book happens to be really big and thick and old and dusty, and it's unusually large. Like, in comparison, when you see it up on the shelf with everyone else's books, it looks strangely large. So, therefore, I've been a lot of people. There's record of a lot of different people in my book. There is also a watermark in my book. And before the watermark, everything is light and dry and sandy. And after the watermark, everything is dark and wet and muddy. I think the watermark marks the Great Flood. It definitely seems to mark where time changed from BC to AD. And if it were the Great Flood that marks that, that would make some sense, because if everything was flooded, then all of our records would be lost, right? So, unless it was carved into stone, it would have been lost to the flood. So, having recorded history after the flood makes total sense. Why else, how else would we all globally get together and decide on a day to start recording history? We can't even get together and decide on a day to celebrate Christmas. Never mind. I mean, though we have, December 24th, but I believe there's other countries that celebrate Christmas on a different day. I don't think we can get it together for much globally. But they seem to have gotten it together globally to decide when to start recording history. In every country, that seems weird. I think it was when the waters receded, and that's when we started recording history. So I have these threads in my book that seem to connect each life with each other life. Meditating is definitely one of those threads. Smudging is another thread. I forgot to bring my lighter over, so I'm going to light this with the fire. This is dried sage. It's bundled. When you bundle it, it's called a smudge stick. So this is smudging. And carefully you want to get the smoke on your aura. Because what this does is cleanses your aura. So it cleanses your outside, which is where other people come in and can affect positive or negativity outside your body, in your aura. So this changes all other people's negativity, and yours that sits on the outside of you anyway, from negative to positive without burning things. We'll put that out before I burn the house down. We don't want to do that. So another thread is fire. Fire safety is very important. So I have a kettle full of water up on top. I have a cauldron full of water here for the smudge stick. I have a sprayer in my kitchen, just inside the kitchen. So if you have an outdoor fire, you want to have a shovel and a bucket of sand and a bucket of water. Dirt will work. But you could also use just a pan of water. I used to put a pot of water on the fire, on a grate, and then that was my water in case something went awry. But I was also multitasking, because then I had boiled water for tea or whatever. So fire safety is really important. If you have an outdoor fire, you want to make sure to have a proper fire pit, and that it's lined with rocks, and that nothing's going to catch, and there's no overhanging branches, and no branches will grow to be overhanging either. And then, you can leave the fire pit unless you're at a rainbow gathering, in which case it has to be cleared away before everybody leaves the forest. But please be safe with your fires. Only you can prevent forest fires. I'm in California, and fire season's about over. We have snow on the ground now, so it's not as big a deal as it was a month ago. But now, it's still a big deal. You still have to be careful, and you still don't want to light the forest on fire. I have a floater. It's gone. I think it was just from the fire anyway. So, grounding. Also, one of my threads is grounding. I've been smudging and grounding and meditating for centuries. Well, that is the one thing about my book, too, the watermark. Before the watermark, my lives seem to be way longer than after the watermark. So the first few people I was lived for thousands of years. So when you ground, you want to blow out all the negative energy that's inside you. And then breathe in positive energy and think an uber positive thought till you blow out positive. And you're essentially cleansing your inside. Whereas the smudge stick cleanses your aura, the breathing cleanses your insides. So you want to use grounding and smudging to get the most positive results out of meditating, divination, like doing a reading, tarot cards, or I read runes. Then before rituals, so as to get the most positive outcome from your reading or your ritual or your meditation. So, I'm going to put my shoes back on. I take my shoes off when I ground. It's just better. It works better. You can ground with shoes on, but it's easier without. It's easiest if you have your feet outside barefoot in the dirt or sand. That's the best. It's the easiest way to ground. They don't call it grounding for nothing. So every week here at Fireside Tales, we've also been discussing how one of my threads is that I've been a medium psychic for every lifetime, I guess, whether I realized it or not. So I've been in contact with the spirit realm in this life, in this body, since I was a little girl. And the spirits have a theory on reincarnation. And that is that people who've been reincarnated were also murdered. I haven't been able to disprove this theory. And the more I talk about it with you, the more it makes sense. And I don't see why multiple spirits would lie to me. That's weird. So, last season, I discussed each life in my book briefly. With each episode, we discussed another life. But I decided that 45 minutes was just not enough time to tell someone's life story, especially if they lived for thousands of years. So this season, I've gone all the way back to the very beginning of my book, to the very first life in my book, that of Little Flower, an ancient Mayan female who lived in what is now Peru in South America. I almost forgot to tell you the story of the Grateful Dead. Zipping into Little Flower, but first, let me tell you the story of the Grateful Dead. Once, long, long ago, there was a traveler. So long ago that she traveled by foot. And one day she happened upon a little village where there was a crowd gathering. She got closer and heard that they were arguing. She got closer still and saw that they were arguing, quite literally, over a dead body. They were arguing about who was going to pay the dead man's debts and who was going to bury him and who was going to pay for that. So the traveler, thinking this whole scene was quite disgusting, stopped these people in their tracks and said, "No, you are not going to argue over this dead man's body disrespectfully. I shall pay his debts. I shall pay for a proper burial." And she did. And then she prayed over his grave and she traveled on. And then one day, decades later, the traveler, from the beginning of the story, happens upon a life or death situation in which a stranger just appears out of nowhere and scoops her up and saves her life. The traveler is grateful. She says, "Thank you. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why did you save my life?" And the stranger simply says, "I am the Grateful Dead." It's a story about reincarnation. Some people think it's a corpse at the end. Corpses don't save lives. Some people think it's a zombie at the end. Zombies don't save lives. It's just not a thing. So, what happened was that man died. He heard what went on. He appreciated the prayer over his grave and the paying of his debts, so much so that he held that traveler in high esteem until he could repay her. And he was born again in another baby body that grew up, because babies can't save lives either, and became an adult that remembered still the payment of his debts and the prayer over his grave. Some people think there's more to the prayer over the grave than the payment of the debts in gratitude, because some people say that your soul can't move on unless it's prayed for. And I could see how that could happen. I mean, so he was grateful. He was grateful to the traveler for stopping that chaos and crazy nonsense and calling for respect, humanity, and kindness, generosity. Now, that's how I heard the story of the Grateful Dead, from a deadhead by a fire, as it should be told. As I tell it every week here at Fireside Tales. So, Little Flower. We're discussing Little Flower this season and today. So she was an ancient Mayan female who lived in what is now Peru in South America, in the area they call Machu Picchu. So far this season, we've talked about angels, which is one of my threads. I have this thing with angels. And Little Flower's no exception. They were visited by these angels that I've talked about that left messages and gifts, and they left messages and gifts for the angel. It was very strange correspondence. And it was so long ago that no one could tell them that these angels didn't exist. And they really seemed to exist. They were leaving messages and all kinds of things for them. Presents, notes that pertained to their spirit, their spiritual life, their spiritual decisions. So, in this life, I still have a connection with angels, so therefore, it's a thread. It's definitely something that comes into play in every life I've lived and in my afterlife sessions. Mostly, I just come back the day I die, which is how I've been able to pinpoint each person. But there were a few where I waited a little while. Not more than a year, though. So it's really quick on the other side. It doesn't seem that way when you're going through it, but it's super fast. It like takes no time at all in this realm. But when you're experiencing it, it seems to take days. The transition. So Oh, so that whole theory on uh, baby's life starting at conception is nonsense because it doesn't have a spirit until it's born. So that's not a thing, and we need to stop doing that because it's a woman's choice. The baby is in her body. Part of her body can't live without her body. Therefore, it should be her choice whether or not she's ready or can or capable of carrying that child. It's this isn't it should they shouldn't be calling it an abortion law or a non-abortion law. They should be calling it a choice law. Freedom of choice. A law that gives you the freedom of choice as a woman and the right to not be a second class citizen and not have the courts or anyone else in your uterus that you don't want there. Because, quite frankly, that's a private place and no one other than those who are invited get to be there. If you aren't invited, you should not be able to make a choice about whether or not I carry my child. Now, I'm not for abortion. I don't think we should run around using abortions as birth control. But I'm for choices. I'm for the woman making her own choice about her own body. And I think I've been for that for a really long time. Centuries, even. So, we've talked about angels, we've talked about astral projection, and how Little Flower used astral projection to look at the stars and the planets and the galaxies. We've discussed Little Flower's culture and the history, what we know, and the herstory, what I know. We talked about her birth parents and how they were both healers. We've discussed her childhood and schooling. We discussed her higher education, if you will. There were no universities or schools at all. This was 10,000 years ago. I have found, however, the ancient Mayans do have had quite a thorough and advanced higher education system. So Little Flower's teachers were her parents. And her parents were both healers. So, as I've said, her higher education was in healing. She learned hands on from her mom and dad, helping them, apprenticing, if you will, um, until Little Flower became the healer of the tribe. As a healer, much like her parents, she also became a teacher to teach her healing. Back then, they didn't have sex discrimination yet, or age discrimination, or youth labor laws. So Little Flower was in construction, masonry, farming, teaching, healing. And then she taught healing ultimately, like her parents before her, to her eldest child. as I believe Little Flower was also the eldest child. I had siblings. Little Flower had siblings, but they did not become healers. Her eldest was a boy, Little Flower's eldest, but her parents' eldest was a girl, so she learned healing and then she taught healing to her eldest child, that was a boy. So she taught him, but in some ways, the teaching of her son taught her things. The best teachers learn from their students, and I believe she learned a lot from her son, teaching him to be the healer of the tribe. Learned a lot about herself. You can learn a lot about yourself teaching what you know to someone. You learn what you know, at the very least, right? So she taught her eldest the same thing she was taught, and then he learned at her knee, apprenticing, if you will. So she only knew the way she was taught. And music was a huge part of the teachings. They had a song for everything. There was a song for growing crops. There was a different song for growing different crops. There were uh, songs for the animals and songs for the trees and songs for the mountains and songs for rocks and songs for certain kinds of rocks, and it was very songy, very musical. Though they had no musical instruments, it was all through singing. And Little Flower's mother's name was the word for singing. She was literally singing. That was her name. So Little Flower taught singing, and she taught it to her son and her children. Singing was the thing that you could teach anyone, and it was how they communicated with the world. The people, the beings and creatures other than humans. And we could still do that today, but we ignore that ability or have forgotten. So, speaking of singing, every week here at Fireside Tales, I've been singing um, a song I wrote about reincarnation called Before. And I wrote Before, uh, I was singing David Crosby's Deja Vu, which is the only song I really know besides Before about reincarnation. So I was singing that. But now I have a new song that I am going to sing you now. And it is totally about reincarnation. So Thanksgiving has happened since our last Fireside Tales, and I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving, a safe Thanksgiving. Hope everyone has a happy holiday coming up, whatever it is that you celebrate. Have a merry one. Somebody stabbed me in the back, and now I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. But I lack memory of who I was. I must look back. But I lack memory of who I was before. Opened the door and I found out who I'd been before. Who I was, when I was, where I was before. I opened the door to find it there. No more, no more, no more. Before. So, that's before. So, that's about it for me today. Though it is a Christmas season, so I should probably go ahead and plug my website, merlinmililli.com. All 19 of my albums are available there, and my art. This is a piece of my art, an example of my art. However, this one isn't for sale because I use it for Fireside Tales. There's another one up there I don't know if it's getting in the shot, but you can see all of my art under my art at my website. And, well, you can see the pieces that are for sale and some of the pieces that I sold already. And like I said, all 19 of my albums. And then I have dollar downloads. You can download the albums for just $1. It's 12 songs for $1. It's cheap. So, visit my website if you need gifts. If there's any Merlin Mililli fans out there, they might want some gifts. Everything that I have for sale is totally collectible. My CDs and tapes are all signed and numbered limited edition CDs and tapes. And my art is also original artwork. You're ordering the actual piece of art. So that's why they're a little pricey. If you are interested in prints of my art, let me know, and I can arrange that. We can make prints. So, I guess we're done here today. Be safe with your fires. Be safe with your holiday. Oh, and I guess that is about it for me here. So, have a great holiday. Have a weird and wonderful weekend. Thanks for starting it by my fireside. I'm a Lily Studio.